patches from our shoulder patches, remove all 101st emblems that were on the vehicles, because we were going to travel that night. They didn't want the Germans to know, or the civilian population to know, that we were leaving Bastogne, for a simple reason. We were going on to Alsace-Lorraine. There was a breakthrough there too, and they wanted us to stem the break in there. So we went to I think it was the 7th Army that was under attack in that area, and we had to go there. And we went there, and so when we got there, things were on a quiet side after that. And that's how the war started to phase out. This was towards the end of January, February.
Did you see fighting then, or were you just
a little bit, not too much. The skirmishes, not
It's been a very brutally cold winter.
Oh, bitter. In fact, there were many of the trucks that sometimes would skid off the road because of all ice on the road.
And were you every night out in the foxholes?
In the foxholes, sure.
You didn't have shelter?
No shelters. In fact, at one time we were up in Holland. We couldn't even make any foxholes. The rains were so heavy in the month of October that you were flooded. We had to go into barns and stay in the barns. So I remember one particular night in a barn, we opened up our I forgot already, those shelters, the sleeping bags.
Yeah.
And we were in the sleeping bags. And one fellow said, "Cover up," he says, "the rats are running loose." It was weasels. Weasels, well, they're rodents also, but they were all over the barn.
But you never got into trouble with trench foot or frostbite?
No,
like
a lot of fellas did, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, a lot of them did.
So around February, you said the war began to sort of peter out for you. But what was the remaining missions between February and the end of the war for the 101st?
Yes, well, from there on in, we were stationed in France. And the next mission we had was to go to let's see, it must have been around, I would say about March, that we were still in France. March, about the beginning of April, that we were told we had to go into southern Germany, the Bavarian Alps, and we would attack Berchtesgaden, which was the hideout of the Nazis also. That was the redoubt.
This is when? The beginning of April?
About the beginning of April.
Yeah, I guess the fear at that point from reading the books is that the diehard Nazis and the SS were going to go and sort of hide out in the Austrian Alps,
right,
and regroup for another attack.
That was the belief on that. It didn't work that way, but we found it out later on. But that was the theory of it, and we were to attack that area. And the plan was the 101st to go in there, and to get there, we had to go through southern part of Germany into Austria. Okay?
And this was all through Allied conquered territory, right?
Yes.
So you went from France through Germany.
Through Germany,
into Austria.
right, the southern part of Germany, into the Bavarian Alps. And I remember us going through Tamsweg, Austria, and then to Munich. And at Munich, we saw the concentration of Dachau. Now this was a tremendous area. In fact, there are many reports, this outfit broke through and...
Okay. Fine. Okay, so you're telling me about the liberation of Dachau? You said your outfit wasn't involved in the liberation?
We don't. Our mission was to go to Berchtesgaden. Mm-hmm. And so we passed by the gates. We saw the inmates, some of them were still alive, standing by the gates.
It had already been liberated?
No. No one had came in. The guards had run off and left them. But some of them came to the gates, saw them with the uniform, with their outfits on, See? But we had to go on because we knew that there were always occupation troops. There were so many occupation troops that were coming in behind us. Wherever we went, there were occupation troops coming in. Our mission was a fighting outfit to get up to Berchtesgaden. Mm-hmm. Now we had to attack. We got to Salzburg, Austria, and then they told us over Salzburg. That's the next place is where Hitler's hideout is. See?
Right.
So we had to get there. We told that we're going up to one spot. The 82nd is going up the other side of the mountain, and on the other side of the mountain, the French First Army is going up. Well, we started. we came to the place where in the mountains they had, to get to the Berchtesgaden, they had an elevator where their cars would take them right up to the very top of the mountain. So they had broken the elevator, whatever it was, they did some damage to it. The Germans did themselves, I don't know. So we had to get up to the mountain. The top was 7,000 feet above sea elevation. Now, we're not mountain climbers, so we had the 10 mountain climbers come in from Italy to throw the hooks up, and we could have a rope to hold on. We weren't mountain climbing, but just a rope along the ground as we were going through the trees. You know, we're carrying our pack just as a handrail, you know, to get up there. By the time we got up there, we saw the French. It was like a parade. They were carrying out furniture from the Eagle Desk, couches and chairs.
They found it unoccupied.
Unoccupied. There was nothing in. They did find the 101st. Some of the parachute units got a hold of. I think this guy by the name of Skreitz and a few others, Nazi leaders that had hidden out there. You know.
This is in Obersalzberg?
Yeah, but there was no more fighting there.
But is this Berchtesgaden?
Berchtesgaden.
Berchtesgaden, which is in Obersalzberg.
Right.
Okay. But the Nazi hierarchy wasn't there.
Gone. See.
And that was basically the end of the war for you.
That was the end of the war for us.
But the ceasefire was, when the surrender was signed, where were you?
It was in May. I was up in the Bavarian Alps.
You were there, in Austria.
Right, in Austria.
Do you remember the night that the surrender was signed, what came into effect?
Well, we got it the day later than that. The news was that the war was over. The end of the war had ended.
Because they described it in the books as the people who hadn't seen lights at night for years because Europe had been blacked out.
Yeah.
That the first night of peace,
yeah. Well, we
the
were
lights
up in the countryside, in the mountain parts there. You didn't see no lights at all. But I remember seeing one thing. I remember seeing the Germans who were in the Po Valley in Italy had surrendered and were now coming back on horseback. Thousands and thousands of them traveling by night and day, coming through our area where we were in Berchtesgaden, coming back to the English prisoner of war cages. So we were up on these farms up there, and we took some of the horses. And the next thing we knew, one of the German officers who spoke perfect English, he says, "These horses do not belong to you." He said, "The horses don't belong to you either." He says, "I will report this to your General Eisenhower. Return these horses." We said, "The hell with you." See, that was it.
How much longer did you stay in Europe at the end of the war, after the end of the war?
Well, what happened there, then they, when we were up there in Berchtesgaden, there was a place called Konerski Lake. This was a resort area for the German High Command where they would send their high-ranking officers as a rest area. They were all hotels. And we were quartered there. They gave us that. They were going to make this for the American Army, but we were stationed there, so they gave it to us first choice. To be, we stayed in the hotels. They made our beds. They gave us 3 meals a day, cooked meals. They waited on us as if we were kings.
Who was it who was waiting?
The Germans. It was run by Germans, and these were the Germans that doing us. See, and. They started giving us rest areas. Now, some of the men were high pointers who had served for quite some time. For example, for every month that you were in the American Army, you got 1 point. For every month you were over in Europe, you got 2 points. For every combat mission that you were in, you got 5 points, you see, and so on. If you got a Purple Heart, there's so many points. If you got a Bronze Star, it was so many. So there's some fellas that ran up 100 points, and they were being shipped home immediately. Some of them were going home in the months of June and July. Well, I had 65, so by the time they got to me, it was in December. Well, anyway.
But it meant that it protected you from having to get sent to the Pacific, right? If you had fewer points, you might have had to go to the Pacific.
The story was at that time that, well, we're going back a little bit further now. We're going back to the months of August. In August, I think, is when the war was over in Japan. But I think like the month of July or so, they were telling us that if they were going to ship the outfit back to the States, we would have 30 days relief, and then they would be shipped out to the Pacific. And the fellows used to say, let us get back to the States, they'll never see us again. You know? But it never happened. The war ended there. And
So you stayed in the Austrian area
Right.
until you were discharged back to the States?
Right. No, before that. Then I went back to France. What happened was they had this resort area, and then they were setting us up, and they would send the men there for 10 days. Like the high pointers were being sent home, the others were sent to the rest area. Well, when it came my point, they sent me to the rest area. I had good connections with the first sergeant. I never misbehaved. I never gave them any trouble. Whenever there were passes to be had, I got a pass. Even without asking, I was sent to Paris on passes. In between, I always got a pass, see. So now they sent me to this rest area called Courtesy Lake. I was there for 10 days. 10 days, the fellows that I came up with are going back.
Go ahead.
And they still didn't call me, you see. I see new fellas coming up. I says, what's happening? He says, all the high pointers are going home. And I say to myself, gee, I'm a married man. I'd like to get out of here too, get home, you know. And I think about I'm just guessing now, on the 15th day, I went to the hotel where they had an office there, American soldiers. I said, call my outfit and find out what's happening. I says, they sent me up here. He says, why, you don't like it? I says, yeah, but I'd like to get home. See? So they called the outfit, and they said, yes, they'll be sending you, they'll be calling for you one of these days. But I'm enjoying myself. I'm going swimming in the lake there, and they had a rowboat, they took us around. It was like paradise compared to what I had been through.
Mm-hmm.
And sure enough, finally, they brought me back to the outfit, and the first sergeant says to me, what happened, you didn't like it? I said, yeah, it was great. He said, I ought to put you on KP. He says, I was being annoyed by calls that you wanted. I said, I want to go home, Sergeant, see? So anyway,
You were at this point private first class, right?
I was, by that time I was corporal.
You were corporal?
After I came out of Holland, I was made a corporal.
Oh.
And now, I'm just guessing now, I think it must have been around, maybe about November or so on. They sent us to France.
Mm-hmm. So you left Austria and went to France in November?
France,
Mm-hmm.
at a French base camp there. And we were there for a short time, and then they started sending the men to, I remember I was sent to Le Havre, and they had camps there. I went out to Lucky Strike, that was the camp I was sent to. Like, they had different names of camps that were called after cigarettes, like Camels and so on. I went to Lucky Strike, and that's where they were going to send me back home. And I think it was on December the 11th, I was on board ship. In fact, I have a memory of that time. I had gotten trench mouth. The bottles were passed around with whiskey, you know, you took a sip, and I got trench mouth. The dental tried to do something for me, they couldn't, so they sent me up to the medics, and I got a couple of penicillin shots, and that didn't do the trick. So finally, they sent me up to the camp there, and they said, they have to extract the tooth. I said, do whatever you want. I said, because I want to get on board ship. And they yanked the tooth out. And I still went on board ship with the trench mouth. I came home with it. I couldn't get rid of it till I saw a dentist here in the States. And I came back on the ship, I don't know, the ship I think took about 11 days to come home. And I arrived just in time for Julie's bar mitzvah.
Reception.
And so you arrived, that was the first time you saw Bernice since you were drafted?
That's right. No, since I saw her when I was drafted, while I was in basic training here, I saw her a few times.
But since you were shipped overseas, it was the first time you saw her.
While I was overseas in Switzerland, I got a furlough at the end of the war. I got a furlough to the French Riviera for 10 days, and then I got a furlough for Switzerland. And when Switzerland was a little country, and I made a phone call, a collect call to Bernice. I'm glad she accepted the call. So that was 15 months since the time she hadn't heard my voice.
Did you have any experience with anti-Semitism in the U.S. Army while you were?
I heard a great deal about it, but I didn't. What I had was very little. At one time, I applied for one of the warrant officers was killed going into Holland. And I applied for the job. And we had a fellow by the name of Max Fisher, who was a Gentile fellow. He had a Jewish name, but a Gentile fellow. And he says to me, you put in an application for warrant officer? I said, yes. He says, well, don't you think Sergeant so-and-so is entitled to it? I was entitled to let him take it. I says, there was a position open, I put an application in. He says, no, he says, I think you want to withdraw it. I says, okay, Sergeant. I ripped it up, threw it in a basket. So that's the first time I suspected something that he regarded me as a Jew. See, that's it. The next time is when the war was over and they were giving furloughs out to England, I had gotten a furlough to the French Riviera. I had just come back and walked into the bunk when Corporal came in and called me that the first sergeant wants me outside. And I saw other fellas lined up for other furloughs. The first sergeant says, Schwaber, you're getting on that truck. I says, Sergeant, I just came back from the French Riviera. He says, so where's she? You're off to Switzerland now. And somebody yelled out, that's his Jew buddy. And the sergeant said, who passed that remark? Nobody said it. He was silent. See? He says, nobody's going anywhere until I find out who passed that remark. Nothing was said. Eventually, I went on the truck and everybody else went on their way. But at the first time that I really heard a remark like that.
Did you, as you were pushing through Europe, were you aware of what the Nazis were doing to the Jews?
Well, we heard something, but not much of it.
Did you notice, and after the war ended, when you were in with the occupation forces, did you?
Well, then we knew. When I was up in, when I had taken a trip to Switzerland, I had gone to Davos, and up at Davos, I met people there that had been in concentration camps that had consumption. And they had them up in the mountain areas there that had come out from the concentration camp.
But when you were pushing through past Dachau, you didn't know what had gone on there?
No. But I have some interesting things I'll show you while we were in Holland. I found a horse and wagon was going through, and this man sitting on the wagon had the armband of the Jewish Mogen David on his arm. Mm-hmm. And I was with an Italian fellow, and he says to me, look at that. He says, you want that as a souvenir? I says, why? Just take it off his arm. And I said to him, ich bin ein Amerikaner Soldat. Du darfst nicht, nimm das so bitte. He said, nein. He's afraid. He says, the Deutsche sind nicht da mehr. The Germans are not here anymore. So this Italian fella pulled it off, ripped it off, and somebody says, here, you got a silver there. So I'll show it to you. You want to see it?
Yeah, sure. So now, Bernice, I want you to, if you come close to Sanford so that you can get in.
We're going to give him a break.
I want to ask you what it was like while he was overseas.
What do you mean?
What it was like for you personally, what you remember of that time.
Well, it wasn't very pleasant. I went to work, and every day I hoped I'd ever get to the office or back because my stomach was going around in circles, but I managed. And there were a couple of times that your grandparents came to save my life because I needed them badly when he was not missing it actually, but when I didn't hear from him for 3 months. And then when I read the paper that the Alpha was captured in the Bastogne. And I called Dave up to come and get me. I was on the subway. He wanted to know where I was. I said, I don't know. He said, do you have money? I said, yes. He says, well, take a taxi here, which I did. Well, fortunately, it was just before New Year's Eve, and a couple of days later, the news was in the paper that they had been freed or helped by Patton. But still, I didn't know what the outcome was. But it wasn't easy living with it on a day-to-day basis when you saw in the paper his outfit. When it was somebody else's outfit, you didn't know. But when his outfit was mentioned, it was very difficult.
What was your work? What were you doing?
I went back to work. I worked at Macy's, and I was living with my parents. I went back to my parents, so I had a lot of support here. My father kept me busy counting food stamps because at that time the people could only have a certain amount of canned goods or buy a certain amount of meat. So they had to have little coupons to bring into the store, so we used to count them at night for them because there were so many of them. And the best thing was to keep busy. Dave best helped me was they took me away for a weekend. Was what else? And I was in constant contact with your grandmother. We call her Mom. And done about back and forth with the mail and everything.
When you say my grandmother?
Grandma Gussie.
My
No.
my
Great-grand-
my great grandmother.
Great-grandmother, was yeah, my Gussie. And I used to go over there like every week if I had time, or every other week, if I didn't have any, with some of my friends who also had their husbands in service. But it just was the emotional strain was worse than the physical strain. That wasn't easy at all. I would never want to go through that again. And I don't wish it on anybody. That's why I say come to America.
When you were reunited in December of 1945.
Yeah, it was a time of your father's bar mitzvah.
You remember? Can you describe? We have to end, so can you describe the reunion? You came in by boat, I imagine.
Oh, when I arrived,
Yeah,
yes, I
okay.
came
You were
That was
waiting
a
for
very
him?
funny incident
very bad,
that night.
stormy trip across the, came back on a boat that was called the William and Mary Victory Ship, carried 1,100 men, and it was just tossed around like a cork in the ocean. It was a terrible thing. In fact, I understand that there were no ships on the Atlantic Ocean coming across. We were the last one across because of the storm. Very bad.
That was the time I was driving the Coast Guard crazy. I was calling up continuously to see what I was doing on the ocean. But my mother had prepared all the foods that Sanford liked, when he was coming home, the cake. He was a big Russia. And that one night, he landed, we didn't know until afterward. My mother, Dad, and I, we all got up at the same time. It was about 1 o'clock in the morning. For some reason or other, we couldn't sleep. So we were having tea and cake. The next day, Sanford called me. He said he landed at 1 o'clock in the morning. It was like mental telepathy. And then I didn't see him till Julie's bar mitzvah.
No.
Then he had to go back to camp.
Oh, you weren't there on hand when he came in.
Pardon?
You weren't on hand when he came in.
No.
I landed at Bush Terminal.
But we didn't know when he was going to land. No one knew.
The strange part is this, as we were going through the warehouse at Bush Terminal, I saw a phone, but I didn't have a nickel to make the phone call.
So you were first saw him at my dad's bar mitzvah?
When he came to the house, he wrote me in advance to get his clothes out of storage because I put all my household furnishings and I had a trunk full of his clothes that went into the storage house. So I had that back here and everything was washed and ironed, the suits cleaned and everything ready for him when he came home. They were a little baggy on him when he came
But
home.
he came in uniform to the permit.
But I have to tell you one part.
Did you go to his
Yeah.
He was in uniform.
Sure, I'll tell you, but I have to tell you what part. See, so what happened was this. I landed in just a couple of days before the bar mitzvah, like I think on a Thursday and so on. But on a Saturday morning, they came into the bunk where I was, and they said, you have to report to the chaplain. I thought, God knows what happened. So I came up to the chapel. It was a Shabbos morning, and they were having service. And they said, what do you want? And I said, I was going to stand at the rabbi wanted to see me. He said, yes, just a moment, stay here. They went up, they told the rabbi, and he had somebody else continue with the service, and he took me in his office, and he said, I had a call from Rabbi Wahlberg. He says, I had a call from Rabbi Wahlberg, the family rabbi, that there's a bar mitzvah taking place and the family would like to have you attend. He says, but I have no authority and there's no way I can get you out. He says, but I'll tell you what you can do.
Okay.
He says, you have a parachute and glider on your cap and an emblem from the 101st. He says, even though it's Shabbos, he says, remove it, take it off. He says, because you cannot get off the grounds with that. So I took it off. He says, now, he says, let me have your wallet. So I take my wallet out and I hand it to him, see? And he says, my God, you must have $1 million in there. What I had was $1,000 in $5 and $10 bills that they had transferred my French money into American money. He says, the reason I want your wallet, he says, I'm going to give you one of the men's Class A passes. He says, I want you to put it up this way in your wallet. And when the MPs come along, you'll show them that pass like this. He says, and you may get by with it. He says, you may get by with it. But if they catch you, don't tell them that I gave you this. And just tell them you found it somewhere. You found the pass. He says, and if you get through, please mail it back to us or drop it off at the camp, see? So that's the way. So that's what I did. I got on, I took off the patch and everything, and I got onto a bus, and I got onto a train in New Brunswick that took me to New York.
Oh, the camp is in New Jersey.
Yeah, at the Fort Dix.
Fort Dix,
Jersey, and that's how I got.
How about you were sitting next to Lieutenant
Oh yeah.
Reed?
So all of a sudden, I'm sitting. It is in the train. There's a lieutenant near the window, and I'm sitting the seat next to him. And it's really hot. This is in December. I open up my winter coat, and he sees my decorations and all that on it. And he says, "My God, what outfit were you with?" I tell him 101st. Oh, he wanted to know the generals, and he was a first lieutenant stationed here in the States. And he asked me 1,000,001 questions. And with that, the MPs are coming through. And as I'm talking to him, they just ignored me, and because he was an officer, they just passed me by and left me alone. And that's how I got to Julie's bar mitzvah.
And when were you finally discharged from the service?
A couple of days later,
December 31st.
December 31st,
Yeah,
New Year's Eve, I was out celebrating.
This was the
Did
29th.
you tell him about the funny story about the girl who everybody was supposed to say they raped her?
Oh yeah, well there's so many different incidents.
All right,
There was
well,
an incident.
okay.
There was an incident talking about when I was over in England, when we first arrived in England. We were at some sort of a grounds that one of these castles, and it seemed that some English girl riding on a bike claimed that some soldier jumped over the hedges and raped her. So the captain came along and he says, "All you fellas are going to line up because the colonel and I are going to come through with her, and she's going to pick out the man who did it." Now he says, "I don't want any one of yous," he says, "to deny it. I want to a man. Everyone say, yes, I did." He says, "Now 600 men, all of you say, yes, I did, so nobody be accused." See? So I put my hand up, I said, "Just a moment, Captain. I'm a married man. What happens to the other fellas don't put their hand up, and I'm the only one who puts their hand up?" But anyway, she never showed up. It never happened. So that was it.
So you were discharged on December 31st and you went back to work?
Well, I went back,
Yeah, we had
I
a
had
really
it
good
for about 10 days or 2 weeks, something of a second honeymoon.
We went back, where did we go? Oh no, we went to the Concord then.
Concord.
You were discharged as a corporal.
Corporal.
So you were private in Normandy, after that private first class, and
Right.
after Holland you became a corporal. Okay,
This
well,
young
now we
to
gotta
rank of
see.
corporal.
We gotta show some of the medals.
Now, let me show you, I'll show you some interesting
Did you
things.
show me
Julie,
your outfit? Yeah.
May the Lord bless you and keep you.
that's from my
Sorry,
breakfast
yeah.
money, was from my bar mitzvah portion.
Yeah, right, see?
Man of the Year, 1979.
Right.
I will tell you. When mother told me that when I lived here, I was like,
Schwaber things. How can you, will this interfere this?
No, it's fine. Let's get a little closer that you can see. The eagle is just the 101st. The Screaming Eagle is just the 101st.
That's
the
right.
82nd had a different
A2
emblem.
was AAA on it, All American.
Jim Gavin was the general.
Yes,
and did you
correct.
ever meet him?
Right, no.
He was apparently a very beloved general. Young.
Oh yeah, right, young fellow. I think he was about 34 years of age when he was Taylor. And this is what, to Sanford Schwaber.